Hello.
Hello.
Always enjoy the time with you and getting to reconnect and find out what's going on in your world. So how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Just hanging out with the kids. It's we're on summer schedule now. So
Yes. There were days where I thought year-round school sounded brilliant.
I tend to agree.
Well, you were asking us about how we're doing. We battled with some sickness issues for the last little while. I probably was sick for 5 weeks or more with bronchitis and sinus infections and stuff like that. Got pretty rough there for at least a few days in there, but started feeling a lot better. And then we wound up going to Iowa on a mission of Vineyard regional conference representing missions. And while we were there, we both got sick. And so I just kind of reverted back, and then Marie came down with the same thing. And so we were pretty sick for another 10 days and just really been over that about a week now and feeling pretty good.
But being sick did not seem to slow us down.
No, it didn't. Probably should, but it didn't. So we continued on at the Davenport, Iowa conference. And interestingly enough, we were speaking. Marie was talking and her voice went out, just completely quit on her while she was talking. And so I kind of picked up where she left it and finished that conversation. And I walked off the platform and my voice quit. So there was that kind of thing. So if you can imagine, Joe Cocker preaching, that's kind of where
it sounded like.
That's kind of where we were, a little gravelly and gruff, but we had a good time and seemed to be effective.
So y'all have been doing the regional conferences. Which ones have y'all gone to so far, and which ones are still coming up?
Well, we Davenport, Iowa for the what is that? The Midwest Central region is the only one from our group or our regions we're responsible for that we have gone to yet. Although we were already out in Southern California last week for our son's graduation and to meet our new granddaughter. And so with that, we were out there, and I had not really connected the dots that the Southern California regional was in Riverside County that week. And so Marie stayed with the grandkids, and I took off and went to Corona, and I spent a day up in the South California region conference. And I knew a lot of people. We pastored in that region for five years. And so, there are people there. I got to connect and reconnect, and we have a counterpart to the role we play as mobilizers. And Josh Armstrong he's from Maryville up in Tennessee. And he was there, and he's kind of doing that role there. And, but we got to hang with him a little bit. I did, and kind of see how he was doing it, which was interesting.
But I was around grandchildren, so that was first priority for me. Nothing gets between me and my grandbabies if I'm close.
The higher priority, for sure, is the grands. But we will be going to Cape Coral. I think you're going to be there.
I will.
So yeah. Cape Coral, Florida is our next one on our
Gulf Coast region. And
we'll be doing that. And then we don't have another regional until November.
You said you got to meet the guy that's doing the same job you guys are doing, but on the West Coast. Is that right?
Correct. Josh Armstrong. We've been with him quite a bit in this whole process, so we knew him already. Impressive guy. Also, Glenn Schroeder is the other mobilizer for there are 3 super regions. And so there are 3 mobilizers, although Marie and I fulfill one mobilizer position, I think is how they look at it, but we're kind of partners on this particular region. So the others are Glenn Schroeder. He is out of Washington. And then Josh Armstrong out of Maryville, Tennessee. And they each have a different part of the country that they are responsible for.
So in meeting with him, I know that this position's pretty new. If I remember correctly, they just created this position that you guys have very recently. So you're kind of having to figure out as you go what this looks like. Did that meeting with him give you any insight or change your thought process on anything having to do with the role?
That's a real good question. I learned some things he's doing that we're going to implement for sure. I think this position is certainly in flux as we go forward. And to tell you the truth, there's several new roles in Vineyard, including the super regional position, which is somebody who's kind of directly connects to the national directors and oversees a region of churches. That position's new also, and we are a support role to that position. But that position is in the same process of trying to figure out and define exactly what it is too. So all of us get together, and all of us at all levels exchange information going, how are you doing this? How is this working? What are y'all finding? And in our particular group, which again, Joel Seymour, I love all of these guys. They're all impressive that are in those roles, but we really, really like working with Joel. He's treating it as a team approach to working these regions. And so we are actually functioning as part of a developing a regional team to support the churches. And we're liking that idea a lot. And it's, just an example, kind of what I was just talking about. I think Marie was talking to a pastor in a church, and something came up, and she was encouraging this pastor. And then she calls Joel and says, you probably ought to know something going on in that church that I think your connection would be very helpful. Joel calls and interacts with this church, and it just turned out to be a very positive thing. I think there was a situation, and there was at least some resolution to it. That's kind of what that team thing looks like, and we're all in the process of sort of forming and figuring out what that looks like and how it works. But so far, the feedback has been super with, to a large degree, some of those who we've spoken with will say, we're just very happy somebody talked to us. It's historically, and this is not anybody's fault per se, but the regionals were all 100% volunteer. They all are 100% pastoring a church, and they are asked to kind of be that person in a region of sometimes 80, 90, 100 churches. And it's just a very difficult ask. And many of those churches and pastors didn't have the resource or administrative support to legitimately pull something like that off. So this new structure, these new roles are full-time roles. The first time in the Vineyard, we've had full-time people dedicated to overseeing, resourcing, and encouraging and supporting the churches. And so a lot of the feedback we get, Marie and I are part-time, technically, but we speak, we talk to a lot of pastors in this process, and the most common response has been, we're just amazed. You might be, I literally have heard a few who'd said something to the effect of, you're probably the first person nationally from the Vineyard who's ever talked to me, or certainly ever contacted me about anything. So, and again, it's not that anybody did anything wrong. It's just that it's the first time that we put all the resources towards that purpose as a movement. And I think there are dividends already being paid in that.
Yeah. So what are the things that you're noticing as like trends as you're going to these conferences and making contact with people from across the movement? Either that you see the Lord is doing, or that is like a shift in the culture.
I think the first thing that's very obvious, because, you're hoping, and not just in Vineyard movement, but in other denominations as well, being isolated physically from each other for so long took its toll, and getting back together in person, in community again, seeing people face to face. I mean, we know as leaders that it's important. We get people to understand it's so important to be and get together, and then to have them come together, and just that reality of, oh my gosh, we're back together. Didn't realize so much how much we missed it until we're here again, and that reconnecting, and then to see, first addressing and acknowledging that it has been a very tough season and it's not completely over yet. And so much uncertainty. What God seems to be doing first is tangibly Holy Spirit coming and encountering and saying, you have not been forgotten. I still see you. The thing of, I am so pleased with you and your faithfulness to the work I called you to doing what you do, but that you are more important to me than the work you do. And seeing right now that's so needed, and to see how Holy Spirit engages at every meeting we've been at, and pastors and leaders going, oh, I haven't felt this in so long, or I've forgotten, or this is so good. And to see the encouragement when they leave, walking out going, this was so good. This was so needed. And I watch the faces and some of the conversations that I get to have, and the ministry that happens, and going, oh God, you are so good and you love us so much. And the importance of being together is just, it cannot be understated or underrated. That coming back together is vital to the life of the body.
So do you think that need for that support has always been there, and is just worse now that we've gone through this big pandemic event? Or do you think that that's a very, a new thing?
No, it's always been there. I mean, and it's not something that we weren't aware the need was there, that pastors need support. They need people to encourage them. That's been there. But that need is on steroids. It's been amplified, right? Probably the shutdown and all of that, and the things that we've gone through the last 2 years, I don't know that I think they broke anything. They just revealed it all. Mm-hmm. Right? We had a lot of fragility in the system, in people, in churches. It's people leaving and not coming back. That was a problem that was developed long before COVID. Right? There's something that did not connect. And so what we're dealing with now is really just pulling the veil off of the things that already had been issues, and we just weren't facing them or seeing them or recognizing them. And so we're now in a place where we can't hide from it. If we weren't doing discipleship well, our people, struggled. They suffered. Some left. Some aren't coming back. Those kind of realities are now how we are, what we're facing. And so the timing of having a rethinking and a reorganizing of the way we work as a movement, the Vineyard nationally, is probably perfectly timed, coming off the heels of this unveiling, this great revealing of our weaknesses. And again, not pointing fingers. That's not to be a something that we go, well, shame on us. We should have known. Well, some we knew, some we didn't know, but there's just always things that can be done better no matter what we're doing. And in this season, revealed it. I think it revealed it in every area, not just churches. I think families have dealt with it. They've, it pulled things back and revealed weaknesses in relationships, in families, and dynamics there, in businesses. It covered everything. So churches are not unique in having to try to figure this out, but we might be unique in the consequences of getting it right. And so
what we have and what we have to make it right.
Yeah, that's an interesting statement. We might be unique in the consequences of getting it right. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, we're dealing with eternal consequences. Right.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. I mean, what if there's certain things, if a business fails, it's tragic. If a person dies without Jesus, it's catastrophic.
Yeah.
Right. The consequences are different. And so I just think we carry a high call, high responsibility. And that doesn't mean we get it right all the time and we're perfect, but it does mean when it's revealed, we do what it takes to figure it out. The consequences of us not dealing with it are too high for us to just pretend it's not, the weakness isn't there and keep going the way we're going.
Gotcha. Since you guys are the mission mobilizers, how does the way we do missions going forward change? And like, what is your vision for, what do you hope for the churches that you're working with going forward in this new environment?
The one thing is when you're going through insecurity right now, our economy's in chaos, our people they're all over the place. We're still trying to take inventory, in some regard to find out where we're at, what we've got. When we are in that place of uncertain future and uncertainty in general, the first thing that tends to get cut in a church budget is missions and outreach. That's, when you're pastoring a church, leading a church, your budget has very few pieces that you actually have control of. It's kind of always talked about it in terms of there are certain levers you can play with on your budget, and there are certain levers that you can't turn on or off. Right? Your mortgage is not one you've got a lot of control over. You really have about the two areas that you have some switches you can throw is on payroll and on mission and outreach. Administrative costs stay regularly the same, pretty much the same. Building and just the cost of doing business stuff stays pretty consistent. Insurances, programming stays pretty consistent. So the only switches you tend to have much control over is your payroll and how much you spend toward actual mission and outreach. So what's happening right now is it's very tempting to throw the missions and outreach budget switch. I mean, we're going to, and I've heard it several times as we do the conversations with people, tell them, what's your plans? What are you thinking about missions? I understand it. It's almost the knee-jerk reaction. Well, right now we are really pulling back on all of our mission stuff, and we're going to focus primarily on our immediate community and do things there. And that sounds good, and it is good. I mean, that is an option. But what I would like to see is people take more ownership of the foreign mission part of this mission thing as not a secondary or an optional piece. Here's, in Acts, there's that passage about going to Jerusalem, to Judea, to Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the earth. A lot of people will take that as sequential. Like, I'm going to go to Jerusalem, and when we get Jerusalem done, then we're going to go to Judea. And then when we get Judea right, and we got some extra cash, we might send some folks to Samaria. Yeah. And Marie and I view that as it's a kind of a package deal. It's not you're doing one until you get it perfected. It's that you're doing it all. And one of the things I said in Davenport at the conference was that if we're not careful, we let our budget dictate our values. Yeah. And it's easy to say, I believe in missions, but my budget's not there. We're going to just do X. And my experience is if we do that, we wind up, it's really hard to start a new value. Mm-hmm. Right? Once your church is established, when you're small, actually, it's much easier to play with those things and to kind of decide and declare up front what you're going to be when you grow up and then live that out. But if you wind up waiting until you're finally that church you dreamed of, you've 300 people and you've got a $500,000 budget. Now I can start thinking about mission. It's a real hard thing to sell the idea that this is who we are at that stage, because you've already pretty well lived out who we are for a while. And so what am I hoping for? I'm hoping to influence the churches and the leaders to not sell out their values
Based on their budget.
based on a budget. If you're in a pinch, yes, those are the switches we've got, and you have to throw something. Then throw it halfway, right? Maybe I can't do $20,000 this year to mission, but I can do 200 to a partnership, right? I can do something. And what it says to my people is, I know it's tough and we're going to have to make some sacrifices, but we're not going to not do this.
Because we're all called to it. The what we're called to doesn't change. And also what coming out of this is that the reality of it's not about what your church has to do on its own.
Yeah.
We're in it together. We're going, trying to get the independent mindset to switch to, no, we're interdependent. We really are a family. And we may be small, but man, several of us together, working together, I may not have anything financially in my budget, but we've got people or whatever. It's what we all bring to the table. And there's another reality here about who we are in Christ that we realize as we mature, the world doesn't center around just us. Yeah. That we're here for the other. We're here to be family and serve and sacrifice for the other. What I have is to be shared, not to be kept just for us. And so, that's one of the things that, just the reality of what you value. It's not an either or, it's a both and. And what you want to be, you need to be from the beginning, because it is very hard to change a cultural value, and that you're not in it alone.
Yeah. A lot of the people we talk to churches, they genuinely are going through challenging times. It's been a hard couple of years, and we understand that. That's certainly, we need to know and recognize that budgets and resources have been devastated in some situations. But honestly, the Vineyard's model of partnerships is perfect for that. The partnership idea that Vineyard does missions under is one, it's local church-based partnerships, means local church-based missions. We don't have a mission organization that is ordaining and sending out missionaries. We have local churches determining who and what they're going to support, and then positioning them with other churches who are wanting to do something in the same region and area of the world. So you wind up with a church that is 50 people and might have $100 budget to do missions with. They just they're not able to go make a dent in Cuba, for instance. But if I've got 10 of those churches and they all want to go into Cuba and have a heart for it and pray over it and send teams, then you wind up partnering together, forming strategies together, and that $50 from each of them is now $500 a month going towards that mission vision. Then you can begin to make a dent in Cuba. So a little church of 15 or 20 or 30 people in somebody's living room actually can have an impact alongside the 500,000 member church. We might not have an equal financial impact, but we all have vision for and are all engaged in the mission of Jesus on the earth. And so the partnership concept we work under is perfect for our situation coming out of the pandemic, where our budgets have been hit. I may not can put the same budget I did before, but I can put something, and I can still stay engaged with other churches who together we can continue to make impact.
And I think the other thing that most people don't think about is this: missions is a great discipleship tool. You want to totally capture somebody and their life be forever transformed and changed, send them on a missions trip. I mean, that's what happened in our lives. I mean, Duke's story of that, I think, is worth hearing on what did missions do in his life. It totally changed our future. Everything about our lives were changed because that trip, he found the pearl of great price and found out what he was for.
Yeah, I love that story.
So real quick, share your story, Duke.
Well, I completely love Jesus and been following Jesus for years, but I had, I never had in any way, shape, or form any dream or desire of anything of ministry or even a mission trip. But a friend of mine asked me to go to Colombia on a mission trip. I think I was 28 years old, and I thought, well, I've seen these guys who were going, and it was kind of my first introduction to Vineyard folks, and they were weird. They just did things different, and I wasn't 100% comfortable with some of the ways they ministered. So I told them, I'll go on the trip, but I am not in any way interested in doing any of that ministry stuff you guys do. So I'll just go and kind of watch and take care of the coats and purses and watch that stuff for you guys while you do your thing. And so we wound up in Colombia and went the first night. We had meetings with a large meeting. It was probably 1,000 people in this church. And the person teaching was teaching on healing, and he was teaching it in a way I had never heard. I mean, I went to Oral Roberts University, so I had heard some things on that. Now, let me clarify that when I heard people talk about healing and doing healing, I heard it as people like Oral Roberts can do healing, right? These are very particular, special, anointed people that God has put hands on. And I had no problem believing that, but I don't remember it being presented in such a way that I ever once considered a possibility that I or most anybody that I knew could do it. Mm-hmm. So he was teaching it in a different way, essentially that this is everybody could do it. And he did what I now know is the 5-step healing model. I never heard anything like that. And so when he got to the end of a sermon, he said, we're going to do some demonstrations and model this for you. And I want to just again reiterate that this is for everybody, and you don't have to be a particular special anointed person. And I'm going to demonstrate it by bringing up the newest and least experienced member of our team. Duke, would you come to the front? And I freaked out. I'm like, no, I'm not. I already told him I wasn't doing that. So I was upset with him, but I managed to make myself to the stage. He brings me on the stage. He whispers in my ear, says, somebody in the congregation has an elbow that won't open up, and you're going to heal them. And he hands me the microphone, and he steps off the platform to sit on the front row and leaves me there with the translator. And I'm freaked out. And I'm really, I didn't know what to do, but I went ahead and I've seen Oral do it on TV, right? So I said, okay, somebody here has a elbow that won't open up. And the woman gets up toward the middle section and starts making her way up the aisle. She comes up on the platform, and I'm trying to remember that first step that this guy had said, because I had never heard those steps before. So I wanted to do it right, And I tried, first step I could remember, it was ask their name and ask what's wrong. And so I asked the woman's name and had that conversation, and you could see this little growth on her elbow. There was like a knot on it. And then I start racking my brain while she's talking, really hard to figure out what that second step was. I couldn't remember what it was. And the guy who had handed me the microphone sitting on the front row, he says, just heal her. Like, good, get on with it. And I'm panicked. I'm trying to figure it out. And I didn't know what to do. I mean, my mind is just confusion. But I saw Oral do it on TV. I've seen old videos. So I just put my hand on that thing on her elbow, and I said quickly, in Jesus' name be healed. And I took my hand off, and that knot was gone. And I couldn't believe it. I was stunned. And she starts hollering and flexing her elbow, and the crowd goes nuts, and they're screaming and hollering. And I mean, it was just crazy. It was crazy. And people start rushing toward the front of the platform, like handing babies up and wheeling wheelchairs up and all this stuff, trying to get up there. And the guy who had started this mess started organizing the teams for some ministry up front. But of course, now everybody in the building thinks I'm the expert, and they want my line. They want me to do it. And so I spent the next hour and a half or more praying for people. And almost everything I was doing, one, I had never even seen done. Two, I didn't know if I believed in it. I cast out a demon in that life. I didn't even believe demons were a real thing at that point. Somebody got their hearing. I put my hands on their ears, and they were able to hear. They were deaf. I mean, that stuff, I couldn't believe it. I had no framework for that stuff. And I believed others could do it. I believed that you might have a special person who could do it. But here I am doing it, and it just made no sense. But after an hour and a half of praying, and I'll say this, I believe I'm trying to be conservative when I give some of these stories, but I think everybody I prayed for that night got healed. Mm-hmm. Everything I prayed for happened. And, that's not my experience since, but that's what happened that night.
Yeah.
And I walked out of there an absolutely, completely changed human being. Mm. Right? My whole worldview, everything was gone. My priorities were flipped upside down. Everything, what I thought was reality, was completely unplugged. And my dream of a career in business and entrepreneurial stuff that I was involved in, it just disappeared. Mm. And I called Marie that night, trying to relay to her late at night in a foreign country, waking her up to try to tell her what had just happened. And she was a little sleep-addled, and I was a little excited. And the combination, I don't think she understood anything I said. But the
only thing I could clearly hear him say repeatedly, because he was just going 100 miles an hour, and he was trying to convey what had just happened and trying to process what had just happened in him. But the only thing he could keep saying over and over and over, it was like somebody who was in shock, really, is what it was. He was in a systemic shock, but this is what he kept saying: I know what I'm for. I know what I'm for. I know what I'm for. And I had never heard that come out of him before. I had never heard what was in his voice, the tone, everything. And when I hung up with him, I thought, oh God, what did you just do? Because I knew he was not the same person who was coming home, who had left. Mm.
Yeah, and that was it. I came home. I talked to the leader of that trip on the airplane. I said, "What do I do with this? I know I can't go back and do what I was doing. I mean, this is what I want to do." And the rest is history, so to speak. We began a walk that Marie and I have been on for over 30 years now, of really teaching, equipping, doing the stuff. It's still the same thing that's our heartbeat. I want everybody to experience that shock, as you call it. I want everybody to experience that amazement that God can use them to do things they never even imagined. And so that's still the passion. It still is. And the reason that matters in this is that a lot of times we only look at missions from, we're the great white saviors in the U.S. and we got stuff we need to take and give away and teach these people how to do church right, those kind of ideas. And And there are times and there are things that we do get to take down and release resources that will help those churches. And that's important. Probably relationship might be the better thing and more important thing we bring to them is just relationship, much like we're doing here, encouraging the pastors and leaders in hard times. But the thing that I don't think gets talked about nearly enough is what we receive when we're down there. What we receive from them is often way more important. And what our people receive from the experience of stepping outside of their own little culture and worldview and experiencing something way outside their comfort zone and watching their aha moment come in. I mean, just in this church here in Jackson, I think of people like Rich going down and coming back just completely on fire for mission. Just becomes a driving force. When you want to have, and I just say this for other pastors and leaders and what we feel like, what do we want to see? Is I want people to take some of their leaders, their disciples that they have in their church and put them in that kind of an environment and then just take the gloves off and let the Holy Spirit use them and shake them and challenge them in this environment. I've never seen it fail to make a difference in that person's life.
Yeah.
Not just for the foreign mission field, but for home.
Yeah.
They'll come back different. I think they come back with more faith, more courage, more confidence in this God they say they serve.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to serve God in this, in a safe bubble, but you take them out of the bubble and they find out he's even more powerful there. And it changes things. It changes the way they do life and do ministry. And so I want that part to be more front and center. It's noble in a sense to say it's all about us, going and taking stuff to them. But man, if we go and receive, we will be changed.
Yeah. I sometimes wonder if the power of going into these, like another country or another fully different cultural context, is not so much like necessary. Like, of course we're taking something, but also like there's an incredible amount of power in stepping into a different context where you're there specifically for the purpose of meeting the Lord there and doing what he has for you to do. And we see that when the youth go to youth camp, like we have kids that don't engage at all when they're home at the church. And then suddenly they're at camp with these kids from other parts of the country. And without even being asked, they're going up and ministering to other kids. And there's something about that headspace of I'm here to do ministry. I'm here to be on mission. And just stepping away from your normal life into this new context that has a lot of power to it.
Absolutely. I think that's a great example and analogy with the youth kids going to the youth camp. Same idea. People, one of the questions that we get asked frequently over the years is that why do you think you see more physical manifestations, particularly healing or something in mission field in foreign countries than you might do in your own church or et cetera? And I mean, certainly I've wondered that too. It does seem like that we have, there seems to be more evidence of those things happening in mission trips or foreign soil. And I think a part of it is what you said. I think a good piece of it is that we have removed ourselves from our own comfort and culture. We have blocked off, most of us, perhaps a block of time that was vacation time. We're away from work. We're away from usually we're away from maybe family responsibilities. We're away from the things that are just our everyday. And we've made a point to go make ourselves available to serve the purposes of God in this environment. And there's something to all of that, right? There's the intentionality, there's the sacrifice, there's all of that, and it's dedicated space. We're there for a period of time, and we're not there as vacationers and tourists. We're there for a particular amount of time to bring the kingdom in that environment. And God shows up. He shows up. And can you do it in the U.S.? I think if you can do all of those things in the U.S., I think it doesn't matter where you are. But there's no question that many of these environments we go into have a more open stance towards supernatural ministry, right? And that is a contributing factor to the why does it work one way there. But I think just as important is that getting away from the things that keep you from 100% focused on ministry and putting yourself in that environment. Camp is a great example of a place where those youth go and they're unplugged from all the other norms, knowing that this is predominantly what we're going for. And I think that plays into why you have such experience and the experiences they have in that environment.
Yeah. It's like you get to put the concerns of your regular life on pause for a minute.
Yep.
I think that's really interesting. I think that it's so cool that you guys are getting to do what you're doing, because I think it's so important right now. We've just come out of this pandemic, and like travel restrictions were a thing for a while, and a lot of churches I think probably have stepped back in a big way. Just because they had to, they were forced to. But I don't think that we can allow ourselves to get comfortable not doing this kind of stuff. You know?
Yeah, I agree. And I can say for certain that the churches in the rest of the world that we've been working with are more needing our connections now than they were before the pandemic. So it's one of the things that we've seen is there are foreign leaders who are more in need of relationship and resources, and the U.S. churches are actually have withdrawn a little bit for necessary reasons. And so it's actually exacerbated the issues in some of those places. And I'm not saying any particular Vineyard churches have, but it's just the nature of this season is that the resources we've pulled back and those on the other side are more in need. And relationship, Jay would be so proud of me. Jay Powers. I said relationship 4 times here. Relationship is so important right now when people are in this place.
Yeah, I think that one of the cool things that has come out of that has been an after effect of this whole pandemic thing is this hyper individualism has kind of shown itself to be false and unhelpful. Yeah, I think it's also revealed that the lack of true community in some of these settings is one of the reasons we're struggling now. Yeah, that's one of those areas that the veil was pulled off, was that we called ourselves a family or we called ourselves a community. And when all is said and done, certainly there were some still standing, but we saw a bunch that would drift off that maybe it wasn't quite as much a reality as what we had on our mission statement. I know that it seems like your views on relationship have shifted quite a bit since the beginning of the pandemic. What have you learned about relationships in that time?
Wow, that was a kind way to ask me how come I'm talking about relationships. That's a good question. I have, and I will admit that I could easily be a hermit, at least for a season. But the thing that I have noticed and seen through this season, and I'll talk in particular about some of the mission stuff with our leaders in other countries, they are so isolated through all this, right? We think we were isolated, but some of our pastors in Colombia were literally not allowed to leave their house for months and months. And so I think literally they weren't gathering in any form whatsoever for almost 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And in that, the simplicity of a phone call was almost life and death. I mean, it had such a weight on it. Just that connection. It was, you could see it. It was like getting a drink of water after being in a desert. It just had so much weight on it. And so, certainly I've seen my valuing that contact, and maybe I'll use that word right now, that personal contact point. Something, and frankly, something more than just a Zoom call, although that in its season was life-giving. But that personal connection, that personal contact point has proven to be so important to just their sanity, just, almost to their emotional and mental health. And it's just watching it over and over and over has made me come to the realization that that it's needed. We need it. I still might argue that I still could get on a sailboat with Marie and sail off and be pretty content. But that's, I know that's overstated. And Marie will tell you that I'm a whole lot more people oriented than sometimes I even think I am. Because after about 3 days of hermiting, I start drawing plans for a whole new organization group, some kind of way to connect, get people together, etc. So how has it changed? I think my valuing it literally as life giving and sanity giving has changed, has gone up in this last couple of years.
Cool.
Anyway, our just kind of an update on our schedule. We are in 6 different Vineyard churches over the next 7 weeks doing Metron stuff. So we'll be in North Alabama this weekend doing 2 churches. Looking forward to those. And then we're going to be in Miami doing an event after the regional conference in Cape Coral. And then we are headed in August up to Pennsylvania, and we're going to be in a church there, then going down into Virginia Beach area. We're going to be ministering at a church in Williamsburg, Virginia. That's so cool.
Wow.
And then we're going to be over in the Richmond area and doing a 3-day conference in a church there before heading home in time to go to the National Missions Conference in New Braunfels, Texas. So that's our immediate next, whatever that is, 8 weeks or so. And I think we have, like I said, there's a couple of things I think we'll be doing with Matthew Helland in the end of July, and I think we've got something in mid-September or October. I had to look, I don't remember, over in North Carolina. So that's kind of that's the things we have on our immediate schedule. So we'll be very busy. Y'all can think about us, be praying for us for strength and anointing and clarity and sanity, and that Marie and I spending that much time on the road together, that we survive each other, but it'll be good. We do well in that environment.
Most of the time.
Yeah. We just drove back from Southern California to Houston, 3-day ride, and we actually still loved each other when we got home. So.
And that's good, because when you live in 400 square feet, it's kind of a necessity.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in Florida in about a week now.
A little over a week. We'll be there. I think it's a week from Monday.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Awesome. Well, we love you. I appreciate you. Thank you for hanging out with us, and we'll see you then.
Okay. Love y'all.
Bye, Ash. Love you.
Bye, Marie.